The Hamfest season is upon us, which means you all are likely going to start looking for used amateur radio gear. Not just radios, but antennas and a myriad of other things that you need to flesh out your home shack or your portable shack. So I want to start things off with the one that's going to come up most often, and that's buying gear online. I don't think that there are a lot amount of hams or even non-hams pretending to be hams that go out there trying to scam good amateur radio operators. With that said, either through negligence, ignorance, or sometimes actual nefarious deeds, people do find themselves in situations where they buy equipment that is not working, not as advertised, or sometimes they just don't get it at all and their money goes bye-bye. So covering the internet side of things first, there are like 4 places I recommend you go to start, and 2 of them are ham radio crash course related. The first place I recommend you look for used amateur radio gear is going to be the Ham Radio Crash Course Discord Buy Sell Trade chat. Now, right up front, all internet places that you would find amateur radio gear, it is a buyer beware environment. You are the sole person that is responsible for your purchasing. I'll talk about a couple of things to protect yourself, but keep in mind if it smells like a, too good to be true kind of deal, it likely is, even if it's within the Ham Radio Crash Course. With that said, if you find something that you think is someone scamming, please let the admins know using the reporting tools, and we'll do what we can to do an investigation / just get rid of the post. Now, along with the Ham Radio Crash Course Discord, link is in the description, there's also the Facebook group, the Ham Radio Crash Course Buy Sell Trade. I don't get a cut of any of this stuff. It is largely just a place where people can post what they're selling and what they're looking for and be able to find a deal. You still need to do all of your homework. Now, if you'd like a little bit bigger selection of items, I buy a lot of my used gear on eBay, and eBay generally, at least, the winds change constantly with this, generally will defend the buyer in a lot of cases of where there is an active fraud attempt. I found a lot of used gear there. A lot of the gear I buy is not in great condition that I expect I'm going to have to work on it to get it back up and working to some degree. That's been my experience. With that said, you can find perfectly fine gear on there, and largely you're going to look for people that have high ratings for all of the sales that they have done. So keep that in mind. And then lastly, the QRZ Forums. QRZ is a great place for seeing a lot of gear. I actually use it for price referencing for what things cost along with eBay on their sold auctions. If you use that tool, you can often get a good idea of what past radios and different gear has sold at in the past, which allows you to be a more informed buyer. When you purchase online, make sure to use a credit card. Don't use a debit card, and use PayPal if you can. And no matter what the seller requests of you, you do not need to use friends and family for sending any kind of funds. You are buying something from this individual, and if you use friends and family, you actually lose some of your capability to claim fraud. So make sure that you're just doing a goods and sales type of thing so that you don't chance losing out on a capability of defending yourself later if you have to do a chargeback or report that there's an issue. And this is going to vary extremely based on your credit card, but yeah, you also have the capability to do a chargeback depending on how you sent those funds. So I always use PayPal tied to a credit card, and then I have at least 2 options I can explore if I ever find myself in a situation where I've been scammed, or I bought something that was not what I expected, or is broken way beyond what we agreed to. Now, before I get off the internet thing, I want to talk about eBay specifically when you are buying possibly damaged gear, broken gear, or gear that is advertised as parts or non-working. You can find some really smoking good deals here, though, but just know you're going in like as is. You really don't have a big claim here, particularly when they say, hey, I said it's as is. The thing to keep in mind with a lot of people that sell things on eBay is that they are just trying to move a lot of stuff. They're not necessarily amateur radio sellers insofar as they're just, let's say, moving a lot of technology that they have bought in lots from like Japan. Japan actually is a really vibrant market for used electronics, at least when they come stateside. So for them, they're just trying to liquidate this stuff as fast as possible. If you are unsure the state via the pictures that you get on eBay, contact the seller and ask them for more information. And if you get a bad vibe, get out of there. So the rest of this video is devoted to Hamfests or buying used gear in person, particularly radios, because that's where people are looking for a hot deal. There are a couple things I recommend you have on you, or you bring a skilled person with you that has those things on you, or you attend a Hamfest that has a workstation or radio checkout station like Huntsville Hamfest. They have a fantastic booth that you can take a potential radio you're going to buy to, and they'll do a bit of checkout for you. I thought that just grounding these out would give us a solid, but it's probably because it's a tip ring sleeve connector, and it's keying off of that and putting it into iambic. The things you want to make sure the radios do is power on, obviously, receive a signal, and then transmit a signal. Now, transmitting a signal in a couple of cases really means put it on a dummy load, so a fake antenna, a true 50 ohm load, giving the radio like what it thinks is the perfect antenna, and see if you get full power output using a power meter. If you don't get the advertised power output, there could be something wrong with the radio, which allows you to lower the price or decide that you're not going to buy it. Second, if you have an adjacent receiving radio that can be tuned to the same frequency, so you can bring this with you, right? A handheld or a shortwave radio. You can transmit on the radio you're looking to buy into the dummy load and see if your signal is getting out. This could be Morse code. This could be single sideband. This could be whatever it is that radio does. And yes, if it's a handheld, FM or, whatever mode of operation. Now, radios are often, most importantly, receivers, and that means you're going to have to drive a signal into it. There are a couple of options. I like the Pocket Pal device. It's a little Altoids mint container that's designed for some novel tools that you could use at a Hamfest to drive in a signal, also do a bit of frequency counting. But the idea is that you put out some kind of tone on a specified frequency and see if you can hear that transmitted audio on the radio you might buy. If you hear it but it's slightly off frequency, that might mean that the radio is out of alignment, which is something that older radios have to be occasionally readjusted for alignment to get them back tuned up. And that gives you an idea of whether you should buy this radio because it could be a problem waiting to happen, or you could lower the price because now you know it's off-center frequency and now you can go back and haggle a little bit. Receiving a signal also allows you to hear what the speakers, headphone jacks, all that stuff that's a part of the system, if they're working or not. If the radio has lights, are the meters lighting up? All that stuff is what you should be doing when you're doing this transmit and receive test. Obviously, if you apply power and you hit the power button and it doesn't turn on, you have a problem there, but make sure that you've got a regulated power supply that's putting out what the radio expects. And here's a big caveat and an important piece to note. Make sure you're asking the seller before you take the radio off to the table to get reviewed if it takes 13.8 volts. Some radios want less than that, and if you give them 13.8, you could be damaging them. And vice versa, you may not be applying enough power at only 12 volts when it really needs 13.8. So before you go off, you haven't bought the thing yet, make sure that you're taking it and knowing information before you just power the thing on. Because likely, the guy you're potentially buying it from can't leave the table just for you to go check out the radio he wants to sell you. So make sure you're asking these questions. All right, so you've got a working radio. It receives, it transmits. Now's the time where you check out the fit and finish if you haven't already, if it's not just, completely trashed. Look at the buttons. Look at the knobs. Make sure they're not broken, wiggling, jiggling. Are the headphone adapters in the back wiggling or jiggling? Is the power connection wiggling or jiggling? Anything that's not like firmly placed and solid on your radio is likely a problem you will have to fix or haggle down the sale price. So make sure you're checking all those things out first. Now, when it comes to buying a handheld, I like this Power SWR/frequency counter that is available on Amazon. It's not going to give you 100% perfect readings on things like 1.25 meters, but it works really well on 2 meters and 70 centimeters. And again, this is giving you an idea of, is the frequency actually where the radio is operating, and are you getting close to what the power you assume is? I'll post a link in the description for this. Yes, it is an Amazon affiliate link. And coupled to that, I have a dummy load. This is a 10 watt dummy load for 2 meters and 70 centimeters. Actually, it covers more than that. This will do HF through 500 megahertz. So this could be your one-stop shopping for QRP radios and HT radios. So this right here, a bit of coax or likely the adapters you need to go to an HT or a QRP radio is all generally that you'd require to do some of the checkouts for transmit. You're likely going to need a shortwave radio or a commensurate radio of a buddy. If it's a handheld, handhelds are everywhere at a Hamfest. You can go buy a Baofeng to use if you wanted to, and that kind of thing, for testing the incoming signal on the transmitting side of the radio that's for sale. Now, if you've waited to the end of this video, I'm going to give you a big secret tip on how to buy cheap radio equipment and bring it back up to operating capabilities that will not annoy the heck out of you. And yes, if you've waited this long, go ahead and click subscribe and thumbs up, because this is a hot tip. I'm going to show you a device. This is an ozone generator. I have bought all kinds of electronics from ham radio operators that were smokers, like pipe tobacco, you know, Captain Black, Cherry, Blackwoods type pipe tobacco, smoked in their ham shack every day and got radios from them. I was able to clean the internals using some isopropyl alcohol and some plastic bristle brushes, like what you might use out of a gun cleaning kit. Don't use the metal ones, the plastic or nylon ones that won't leave material like paper towel wood or Q-tips. Get in there really good with the isopropyl alcohol. You might have to take a couple of passes to get all the residue off of the boards and components and whatnot, but then hit it with the ozone blaster. An ozone generator, if you get a big cardboard box and put all the equipment in there, open up the radios, all that stuff, and blast it with ozone for a couple of hours, you'd be shocked that you get rid of almost all of the smells. I've bought laptops, handheld electronics, radios, built up a box, put this in there with it, and just ozone the heck out of it. And that really takes the smell out of things. This also has double duty. If you have kids or a baby and you get milk in a car and that milk starts to smell like really bad, clean it up really good and then throw the ozone generator in there and leave it in there for multiple hours and you're good to go. As always, do this safely. This does emit heat and it can get hot inside the box, so don't put it somewhere you can't monitor it. At the same time, ozone is an irritant to humans, particularly our breathing apparatus. So don't be in the same room with the ozone. Put it in the box and do what you can to be able to monitor it. Maybe use a Weiss cam or something like that. So follow every caution that's on the boxes if you're going to use them. But I've used this multiple times in multiple applications, and it's always a winner. So a couple of other things that you might be interested in buying at a Hamfest, and you probably should, because buying something new isn't necessarily better than buying used, like dummy loads, power supplies, antenna analyzers, heck, even antennas and antenna parts. If you're going to buy a power supply, bring a voltometer and an ammeter. Be able to test that you're getting the amperage out and the voltage that you expect. And what you're looking for with a dummy load is that it's going to, at least for the bands it says it covers, provide a 50 ohm load. Really nothing more than that. Now, I'm not telling you that you should test a 1200 watt dummy load by putting an amplifier against it, but that is something to keep in mind, right? Particularly as you go higher in power. Maybe you should end up buying new in that case if you're worried about protecting your amplifier, if you're tuning up a tube amp, for instance, but it's something to keep in mind. Now, for an antenna analyzer, swing that back around, take that dummy load you just bought, and test an analyzer that you're thinking about buying, or vice versa. These can all be used to test each other out, that you at least make sure that you have a good example of this product before you buy it. Do keep in mind that if you use anything in amateur radio as a measuring device, that the accuracy of its calibration is going to be very important. So if you are testing a tool against a uncalibrated device like a dummy load that you haven't tested with known working gear, that you could be giving a false negative, which wouldn't be good in the case of you potentially missing out on a deal or telling the seller, hey, what are you trying to sell? Garbage to me? Now, if it's a portable antenna you're thinking about buying, something you take into a field, set it up, test it. If you have your radio with you, your portable radio, even better. Use that SWR meter on your antenna to at least test that it's working. Possibly even throw a couple of watts downrange and maybe even see if you can make a contact if that swap meet is outdoors. No one should have a problem with you wanting to see all the parts being available, and if they're not, again, bring the price down a little bit. Test out your equipment, test out the gear, and if you don't know how to test it, ask a ham to help, or go find the local club that supports the Hamfest and see if they'll help you out. And if this is your first time going to Hamfest and you're really worried about buying something, you know, I've found that often when you talk to the seller, a lot of them come back month after month. Like we have a local Hamfest that there's the same people that come back every month. And if you buy something and they basically say, hey, you know, if you're worried about this, you can bring it back. We can work something out. I've not had to avail myself of that opportunity, thankfully. But at the same time, it's usually all hams working with hams, and they're not really trying to rip anybody off. At the same time, I think more Hamfests and really ham clubs that are going to these Hamfests should set up some of these tables to check out radio equipment and also coach newer hams or just uneducated hams on this aspect of the hobby, because it is an incredibly powerful part of our hobby that you can buy really good equipment for really cheap if you know what you're doing and you have the right guidance and education to do so. And I hope this video is one step in that guidance. If you found it helpful, I would appreciate you subscribing and giving me that thumbs up. I am Josh, KI6NAZ. Thanks so much for watching. Leave your comments below. I would love to hear what you found at recent Hamfests. And until I talk to you again, 73.